to speak very quickly. Over the next 40 to 45 minutes, I'm going to speak very quickly about privacy. And this privacy conversation belongs to everybody. It doesn't matter what you do, it doesn't matter what your organization is. Um, Privacy is for all of us. All of us need to worry about privacy. All of us need to ensure that, we're addressing privacy. Even our own organization, A4S, we need to implement privacy right now and ensure that we have a data protection officer. And we need to ensure that, so this is not, people think that it's only for big organizations that have to go to do the filing. Yes, maybe the filing might belong to big organizations, but the implementation belongs to all of us in as much as we collect personally identifiable information. Then privacy is our concern. Whether we do filing or we don't do filing, privacy is our concern. So that's what today is about. It's about today's conversation is about privacy. And I think everybody, in as much as you have staff and you have customers and you're collecting one thing or the other from them, then you should worry about it. So that's what this session is about, and I'm going to try to do it as quickly as possible. Some people will call it privacy, some people will call it data protection. So let me start from here. Um, Let me start from here. This is a good place for me to start, right? So if your organization is collecting any of these things from three categories of people, then privacy is also your own concern. In as much, so if there's one thing you want to take away from here, from this session today, it's this page. If there's one thing you want to take away from this session today, then it is this page. There's one thing you want to take away from this session today, then it's this page. Okay. Now, the idea is that in as much as your organization is collecting these things, in as much as your organization is collecting these things, either you're collecting it from your employees, or you're collecting it from your staff, or you're collecting it from your suppliers/partners, then your organization needs to implement privacy. So if there's one thing you're going to take away from this session today, that's it. In as much as your organization is collecting this type of data from three categories of people, in as much as your organization is collecting this from three categories of people, then you should worry about privacy. You should worry about privacy. In as much as your organization is collecting this from customers, from employees, and from suppliers, then you should worry about these things. A lot in Africa, and I have people from different parts. I believe Nkem is here, seated in Canada. Somebody might be here coming in Malawi. People from Ghana on the call. I might have one or two people from Kenya also on the call. So once again, this is a huge conversation. It's everywhere, right? And I don't think organizations should limit themselves to, to if it is what the I don't think organizations should limit themselves to, oh, the regulator has said it. Apart from the regulator has said it, I need to do some regulatory filing or something like that. Because the last time, and this is very interesting, and they said I have a lot of my friends from Ghana on the call. I sat with a group of about 40 companies in one room, and I was asking them, right? Ghana has got this version of this standard of their own data protection act. We've had it for about 12 years, thereabout. And I was asking all the companies, do they do filing? They said, oh, we all do filing every year. Everybody does filing. But when I was asked, when I then asked them, how many of them have appointed DPOs? People who do filing don't have DPOs. They file, but they don't have DPOs. Now that's a problem. They are doing the filing, but they do not have DPOs. Number two, I asked all of them. I was asking them that how many of your organizations that have been doing this annual filing, how many of you have actually, like, indeed implemented the Privacy Act? And none of the 40 or 50 companies would answer in the affirmative. I mean, so somebody here on this call was there. Abdul was there in that room that day. So people are countries in Africa, they're allowing people file, but those people, they are allowing them file, but those people are not implementing the act. And the act is actually for implementation. The act in itself is for implementation. It needs to be implemented. So this is not, we do governance, and that's a challenge, right? A lot of organizations, anything that is IT GRC related, we're doing them just because we need to do them, like, so that we can tell we can tell the regulator that, oh, dude, we've done it. Look at our document that says that we've done it. We're not really paying attention to doing these things, and we're not really doing them. So it's almost like we're only interested in the appearance of doing them, not really to do them. And that's a big problem. That is a massive problem. If all we are doing is just to give the impression that we're doing these things, but we are not actually doing them. So everybody that is in this room or on this call, on behalf of your own organizations, you need to go ensure that you're doing these things, that you're implementing privacy in itself. I cannot say everything that needs to be said over the next 45 minutes. There's a limit to what I'm able to say over the next 45 minutes as it is. But at least I'm hoping that I'm able to, jumpstart you along the lines of this conversation. And I'm able to push you along the lines of going back to your organization and checking, have you really implemented privacy? And if you're going to implement privacy, it starts from this page. This is where it starts from. This is the starting point. That are you collecting, all right, PII? And PII is referred to as personally identifiable information. Are you collecting personally identifiable information? If your organization is collecting personally identifiable information, if your organization is collecting it, then you need to implement privacy, whether you go and get certified or not, whether you go and do filing in Ghana, in Malawi, in Kenya, in Nigeria or not. That's a secondary issue. The primary issue is that your organization needs to ensure that they actually, like in reality, they implement privacy. That's the key thing, that your organization needs to ensure that you actually implement it. And this is a big list. right? It's a big list. Look at it. It's a massive list that is here. That's, and like it or not, most organizations are collecting these things, collecting them for their customers, collecting them for their employees, or even for their partners or suppliers or vendors, as it is. So please take adequate note of this. It is the centerpiece of everything that we're doing. That is, as your organization really implemented privacy in itself. Okay, I'll still come back to it. As I said, I'm only going to go through a couple of things. I cannot say everything that I really want to say. I'm only going to go through a couple of things on this call, so to speak. But there is this standard, everybody, and you can go to look at it. ISO 29100. There is this standard, ISO 29100, and it's just been recently, just a month or two ago, has just been recently updated. A month or two ago, the standard in itself has just been recently updated. So it's a big deal, all right? And this standard is brilliant because it's not dependent on ISO 27001. It's not dependent on ISO 27001. There are two major standards, everybody, when we talk about privacy, ISO standards, right? There are two of them, right? So it is this one, right? And let me put something here. This one, let me say it carefully. Let me say is not completely. Let me write it as not compulsorily dependent ISO 27001, which is ISMS. It's not compulsorily dependent on ISO 27001, which is for information security management system. That means if an organization has not implemented 27001, they can adopt this. An organization can adopt this. All right. So that's very important. An organization can adopt this, though they might not have implemented 27001. An organization can adopt this. The other good thing about this is that it is aligned to, let me add that to it. The other good thing here is that it is like the aligned to most national data protection acts. Most of the ones you see aligned to most national data protection acts. It is aligned to most national data protection acts, and it is not compulsorily dependent on 27001. Add one more point. It is universally acceptable. That means whether you're in North America, you're in Africa, you're in Europe, this is right. This is acceptable everywhere. It's not like GDPR or the national one. This is universally acceptable. So it's a great standard. If it was not a great standard, if it's not a very useful standard, I've been practicing this for a bit. If it was not great, if it was not useful, ISO would not have thought about updating it. So they've updated it, they've upgraded it. It's cleaner, it's newer. Yeah, as it is. Okay. So this is ISO 29100. This version came out 2 months ago. It's as new gets. It's not compulsorily dependent on 27001. It is aligned to most national data protection acts. and it is universally acceptable. It's brilliant. It's brilliant. Okay. The other one that ISO has is this one. And as of today, they're trying to align it to the new version of the 27001. The existing one is aligned to the 2013 version of 27001. So this is great, but this is dependent. It's great. It's brilliant. This is the old one. All right. This is the old one. And but it is, you cannot implement it. It is dependent, right? All right. You cannot implement it except you already have you've already implemented the old version of the standard. You cannot get it implemented except you have implemented. It is completely dependent. It's not partially. It's completely dependent on 27001. And then, of course, there is this new version of it also. There's the new version of it that, once again, this is now dependent on ISO 27001, but the 2022 version. So those are the standards that ISO as an organization, those are the standards that ISO as an organization, they have with regards to privacy. It's this one, which is my favorite, this one. And that's what this whole session we're having this morning or afternoon, depending on where you are. That's what we're having. This one that is dependent on, that is independent. I take that back. This one that is independent of 27001, right? So it's not compulsory that you have 27001. And it's also aligned to most national data protection acts, at least have been exposed to about 4 or 5 in Africa. And in a sense, it's universally acceptable. And then they have this one. If you have the old version of the standard, and if you have the new version of the standard, that's it, right? When you talk about ISO standards as it relates to privacy, that's it. Right? That's it. Okay. Okay, so that's the introduction of the standard. So once again, in Nigeria, we have the Nigeria Data Protection Act. This is the Nigeria Data Protection Act, and there's an alignment between these acts. It's got 20 major requirements, right? It's got about 20 major requirements. That's not all, but yeah, high level categories in terms of the requirements, right? It's got about 20 high level, but within those high level things, there are a couple of other things in there too. Well, this is the Nigeria Data Protection Act, and I can tell you categorically that it is aligned to 29100. I can tell you that it is aligned to 29100. The same things that they're asking for here are also in 29100. So in a sense, if you've done this in reality, like you really done it, not like you've just put together a couple of documents and just done your filing. That's not what we're talking about. Like you have actually implemented it, then to a large extent, you're aligned to 29100. And if you implement 29100, you're definitely aligned already to the Nigeria Data Protection Act. Right? It was a regulation before, but now it's a full act as it is. And it's a big deal. It's a full act in Nigeria, and it's a big deal. I believe I might have, this is the Ghana one. This is the Ghana. So Ghana's been here for a bit. Look at it. This is the Ghana one. 2012 to today. It's about 12 years. But they have not been, over that period of time, the Data Protection Commission in Ghana has not been going to organizations to independently verify, independently audit and verify that they have actually implemented it. So this is the Ghana documentation, and there's full implementation work that is needed. This is more than just, there's full implementation work that is needed. This is more than just, doing a filing and saying that we have done it. You need to, in reality, have evidence of implementation. You need to have evidence of implementation. This is the one for Malawi, I would like to believe, yes. And once again, that they are also looking at that. How do they do that? I have one or two friends from Malawi on the call, and that's it. Once again, this is also aligned to 29100. It is aligned to 29100 as it is. So that's the background in terms of 29100, what it is, and things like that. So 21100 is the one that is universally acceptable, and it's acceptable even if you have not yet fully implemented 27001. The other ones, it's compulsory for you to have 27001. Okay, this is also a big conversation, everybody. What is the difference between information security and privacy? Most people think that they are the same. I was talking to my colleague, Oinko, that set this meeting up, and my other colleague, Abigail. I was talking to them, and I was saying that, she was defining this, and I was saying that the way you're defining it is sounding like information security. It's sounding like information security. There are overlaps. A lot of things overlap in there, but there's also an area that is different. There's an area when we're talking about privacy, we narrow our focus completely down to PIIs, and that's why I started this entire webinar around around personal information, personally identifiable information. That's why I started it from there, because that's what privacy is about. It has a lot of overlaps with information security. In a lot of organizations, the CISO is sometimes also the data protection officer of the organization. So everybody, please go to the chat room and tell me, in some organizations, the top two people that I've seen in most organizations that are the data protection officers is either the CISO or it's the head of compliance. It's either the CISO or the head of compliance. So tell me, everybody, go to the chat room. Who should be the data protection officer in a big organization? Who is better suited to be the data protection officer? Is it the CISO or is it the head of compliance? Who is better suited? Argue for or against, or argue for whatever your option, or whatever option that you have picked. Argue relative to that. Who is better suited? So that once again, there are a lot of overlaps between information security and privacy. But when it comes to privacy, it's like when it comes to card data, we're not trying to let everything at once. When we're doing PCI work, we're only interested in card data. All right, that's all. We're not trying to do the whole of information security inside of PCI. We're only interested in card and related type things and online payments type conversations. So that you take via your website, electronic payments, POSs and cards. That's all we're interested in PCI. If we're doing privacy, we're not trying to do the entire information security. All right. Privacy is a tiny subset of information security, just like cybersecurity in itself is also a subset of information security. Privacy is a subset of information security. Cybersecurity is a subset of information security. So information security is a much bigger umbrella, is a much bigger bucket for the organization. When we're talking about information security, it's always CIA. But when we're talking about privacy, it's always about personally identifiable information and how you protect in line with a certain act, with a certain standard, the personally identifiable information that you have collected as an organization. So there's an area of intersection, but they're also about two different things. The information security is definitely the bigger bucket. And so I'll go to the chat room when I'm in a short bit to hear the thoughts and the opinion of everybody in there. Who should be the data protection officer of an organization? Should it be the CISO or should it be the head of compliance? What are the advantages of having this as the head of compliance? What are the advantages when it's the CISO? And I'd like to hear from a lot of people in the chat room. Who should be the DPO, the data protection officer of a bank, of a telco provider? Should it be somebody in the, should it be the CISO or the head of compliance? All right. So of course, in modern day, we've moved away from CIA. Now it is CIAP. In modern day, we've gone away from just CIA, which is what information is, all right, which is what information security is, all right. We've gone away from just CIA. Now P is a part of it. Privacy is a critical part of the work in itself. How do you ensure that you protect personally identifiable information based on purposes of collection, based on accountability, based on the rights of the people that you're collecting their data and how you retain it? How do you retain it? Like it or not, a lot of people are involved when it comes to privacy. Compliance is involved. All right, compliance is heavily involved here. Legal is also involved. There's a legal side to it. In a lot of organizations that I've also gone to, is the head of legal. Sometimes in some organizations, that is the one that is the leader for privacy. So it all depends. It all depends as it is. So I've shown you some of this, right? I can't doing a review. Every time I'm reviewing in Nigeria, if I'm reviewing anything that's got to do with data protection and privacy based on the NDPA, these are the typical 15 things that I usually worry about. I worry about the policy and related policies. I worry about the privacy procedures. I worry about the repository. I look at how they've done their gap assessment. I look at that number 6, everybody. I look at number 6. So when I'm doing an assessment for privacy, there's some areas here that are critical. I look at in fact, yes. Yeah, so I dare say, yes, some of these things, right? I look at the core of the matter in itself, right? Because some people also think that this is not technical. They think that this whole privacy thing is just about including, the legal people think it's just about including, should I say, some requirements within contracts. That's what it is, employment contract, customer onboarding form, and things like that. They think that that's what the whole thing is about. Nothing could be further from the truth. That it's more than that. There's a technical side to it. There's a legal side to it. There's a compliance side to it. There's even an HR side to it. There's a core business operations side to it. So when I'm doing a review, I'll look at number 6, which is a big deal. I'll definitely look at number 7 and see if the people are even competent, whether they even understand what it is that they're doing. I'll look at number 8. How have they implemented it in reality? I'll look at number 9, the evidence of effective implementation, and I'll show you a couple of other things down the road. And I also look at how they're doing their communication and notices. So it's evidence-based. It's a full, proper piece of work. It's not something you gloss over. It's not something you just look at it and say, oh, you know what, it's not a big deal, Joe. No, it is a big deal. It's a big deal. It needs to be done and done appropriately. And that's what this whole thing is about. So please take note of this. And once again, as all of you take as you go away, as one of your takeaways from this particular webinar in itself. So I mean, there's not enough. We don't have enough time when we do this training. It's a full 3-day training on what privacy is. It's a full 3-day training. But we collect information, and the information that we collect sits in databases somewhere. Most of the information that we collect, they sit in a spreadsheet, they sit in a Microsoft Word document, they sit within an app, and they sit inside of a database. So you can't take away technology from the world. There's a portion that has got to do with agreements and contracts and things like that that is very legal. But there's also a portion of it that is very technology as it is. So these are some of the questions you need to go ask yourself in your own organization. As I said at the very beginning, it doesn't matter. This is right. So EU is important because that's why you now have GDPR, because they are the ones that really made this a big deal. But it's not just for EU, it is everywhere. If you're collecting data in this connected world, you know that the world as of today is a connected world. If you're collecting data from anybody and from anywhere, then you need to worry about these things. And these are baseline questions you should ask yourself, and you can ask yourself. Like, what exactly, whose data are we collecting, and why are we collecting people's data, right? Or where are we collecting the data? What mechanisms and what channels, right? That number 3 is a big deal, right? Where are we storing the personally identifiable information? Where exactly are we storing these things? Where are we storing the personally identifiable information, right? And how do we do the transfer? Why are we even collecting it in the first instance, right? And how long so you bring conversations around retention, right? Bring conversations around how you retain the data, how long you retain the data for, and things like that. Well, these are baseline questions, right, to ask yourself in your own organization as you proceed with regards to data protection and privacy of personally identifiable information. This is a big deal. It's a big deal. So in Europe, they say you can lose as much as 4% of your total revenue, right? In Africa, they say that you pay fines that if you turn it into dollars, is equal to X amount of money. And in fact, in some of those documentation, they say whichever is greater. So it's either they'll tell you to pay, it can be as much as maybe $50,000 or $100,000 or a percentage of your revenue, whichever is greater. So this is part of corporate governance, ensuring that, your privacy is adequately in place is part of corporate governance. Ensuring that you're doing things right and you're doing things appropriately is part of corporate governance. There are so many organizations, if we're going to have this conversation with them, they won't even, they're collecting personally identifiable data, but they have no plans for this. So this is a conversation you need to have everywhere, right? And there are benefits. Some of you need to go to convince your leaders. Some of you need to go to convince your leaders in the organization that, let's not run this, let's not build this app without thinking about privacy. Let's not continue our business without bringing privacy into consideration. Let's not continue doing things without bringing privacy into keen consideration, right? So you'll find some things that you can use to convince them. One area I also want to speak about is the terms and definitions. As I said, this is a 3-day training. All I've done, because there are so many exercises to do in between. All I've done is to extract some content from the 3-day training material in itself to you for use in this particular webinar. So there's some technical things, as I said. There's the concept of anonymization and anonymized data. There is the concept of pseudonymization, right? So there are many things that you need to know. This is not where you just think that you can use your information security knowledge or just use your general knowledge to figure out. You've got to understand, why do I need to do anonymization? How do I even do it within my SQL Server or within my Oracle database? How do I go about it in itself? There's a technical side to privacy. Unfortunately, most organizations don't know that and they don't realize that. So most people are treating privacy as a set of policies and procedures and in the inclusion of legal requirements in contracts. That's it. That's the best that 90% of the companies are doing. And I have reviewed this in many organizations. Only very few companies are even thinking along the lines of trying to even understand what privacy is, not to talk about implementing it appropriately. So who is the controller? Who exactly is the controller? Who is the principal? Who is the processor? The controller, the company, the principal, the person that you're collecting in some of the documentation, they could say that's the natural person that is filling your account opening forms, that is the staff that you're hiring, or that is the vendor that is giving you their personally identifiable information. So it's a big deal. It's a big deal. I don't have a lot of time in the actual training class. We break each of these things down. We give examples and things along those lines. I think everybody should walk out of this place thinking about who's going to be your DPO. Does the person know enough to be a DPO for your organization? There's so many things that are involved. Who is a third party? What's a sensitive PII? And many other things. Now, look at this. This is the whole framework on the page. This is the entire framework for privacy on a page. On a single page, this is the whole framework in itself on a single page. The actors and the roles, and then the concept of recognizing PII. How do you recognize it? So if you look at 5.4.2, what are the identifiers? That is a big deal. If you look at 5.4.5, pseudonymous data, right? If you look at 5.4.6, the concept of metadata, even in ISO 27001, if somebody is doing it right, there is a requirement for metadata, even in ISO 27001, how you manage metadata. But in this instance, we're talking about the metadata that relates specifically to the people that we've collected their PIIs. So there's so many things in here. It's a big deal. There's legal 5.5.2, but that's just one portion of it. There's contractual 5.5.3. There are the business factors and many other factors to consider. And then everybody look at some of those principles. Now, within the principles, you even see things like consent. And that's what you start to think about that. Why are you even collecting this data in the first instance? What is the use and the value of even collecting certain data sets? You don't always use all the data sets. Why are you collecting it? Purpose and legitimacy and specification, right? How do you limit your collection? How do you do data minimization? How do you do that? This is not English. This is technical. And you can't really say you've done privacy in your organization if your IT people are not helping you to ensure that this is done at the database level, that this is done at the application layer. There's some technicality that is involved. You can't approach this work the same way lawyers and accountants and compliance people it's more than that. There's a technology side to it. And that is why if most organizations will run away from 27701. I just did an audit for a client on 27701. I just did an audit for them. Most people run away from doing that particular standard because they will see that there's technicalities involved. And I showed you this. I mean, this is a privacy framework, everybody, based on the new or based on the new version of the standard. It is aligned to the Annex A controls. Maybe it's better to use this. So look to my left. That means there is privacy everywhere. There's privacy in 6.2, 6.3, 6.4, 6.5, 6.7. There's a privacy requirement tied to each of the Annex A controls. Now, this is tough. That's why most organizations run away from it. Most people are not ready for something like this. They don't have the skills. They don't have the competence. They don't have the knowledge to be able to do this and to be able to do it right. And that's a concern. So so this one pager here tells you about 29,100. So look at 6.11 there. It speaks about information security. So I've tried to say that I've used my green and yellow to say there's some technical and non-technical. The non-technical things are the things that are in yellow. The things that rely on IT, that rely on databases, that rely on software applications. For you to implement them appropriately, I put them in green. You need to go back and really think about, is your organization really doing privacy? Or you're just, yeah, whatever that is. Are you really doing it? Or you're just filing and filling up documents on an annual basis? So, and there's a massive challenge in the marketplace. Nobody understands this. The client does not understand it. The implementer does not understand it. The auditor does not understand it. The head of compliance does not understand it. The technical side, the IT people have not been involved. So there's so much ignorance in the marketplace when it comes to how do we adequately implement privacy in our own organization. And that's why we're holding this session. That's why we're talking about this. I can talk about this all day. I can tell you the specific steps and the specific things that an organization is to do to ensure that they have truly and appropriately implemented privacy. To tell you those things, I don't think that this is indeed the occasion for that. So once again, their actors and their roles, the controllers, the processors, the third parties, and there are many things in here that you can use. There's also a naming convention because you might want to think about the naming convention. These some people who do. There's a guy. He's Nigerian. He's in Abu Dhabi now. This doing privacy. He used to be is an enterprise architect. He's doing privacy work in Abu Dhabi. And he called me some weeks ago, and we were talking about a data protection architecture because he's an enterprise architect as a person. And he showed me what he was doing, and he wanted me to correct him and guide him in terms of how to do some of those things. Like, where exactly are the data? Where are we collecting these data sets? Where are we storing them? And how are we managing them all the way from collection or transmission and then the collection, the storage in itself? So he was mapping databases, mapping storage drives, mapping SANs, mapping them to business forms. So I sat down, we must have spent about 2-3 hours, and I was telling him that, you know what, you didn't include this. This is how he did an excellent job. He's an architect, so he's a great guy. He knows the work. But he still brought it to me that, you know what, okay, tell me where it is that I might be missing. Then I told him about some other data sources. I told him about, things like vendor registration and how he needs to map that. And we did all that. So how many companies that are really big? And that's because the bank that he's working for in Abu Dhabi, they have to do way more than just filing. It's got to do way more than that. So it has to have some kind of architecture that they are going to use for data protection. It's a big deal. So how many organizations that you've seen in West Africa, in Nigeria, in Ghana, that are thinking beyond just data protection, that are thinking beyond just filing, that are thinking about an architecture for data protection? All right. These are all things you've got to look at it. I've got a slide here. So these are I showed everybody this at the beginning for the people who came in here late. I know that some people came in here quite late. This is where I started this session from. All right, saying that everything about, if you're not collecting any of this from staff, from customers, and then from your vendors, then you don't have a problem with privacy. You should just tell everybody that you don't collect these things. So you're free of privacy challenges. Automatically, you're free, you're fine. If you're not collecting this, then you're good. If you're collecting it, then there's a problem. If you're collecting it, you have to deal with, is there some legitimacy in the collection? Are you getting people to sign consent? How are you collecting it? How are you treating it when it's in your custody? And how are you managing retention? Where are you keeping it? Where are you storing it? How are you securing it in your custody? This is a big deal. This is a big deal. As I look at things like this and I keep watching Blacklist and watching Mr. Raymond Reddington, I can see, what's the name of the other guy? Aram. I can see how they do a lot of their tracking because of the types of information that they know and they have access to for different people. This is a big deal. And this is where everything starts, everybody. It all comes down to the forms that you use as an organization. None of this is in a standard. I mean, I know these things because this is my job. So the standard is not going to give you a form and all that. But when you work the client, you have to think about it. Where is the birthplace of data collection? It is one form or the other. So most organizations need to go back and review their forms. Do we even need this information that we're collecting? Is there a purpose to the collection in itself? Because we're limited by what we should collect, we're limited by how we should use it, and then we're compelled to keep it protected, safeguarded, in line with many standards. So why collect what you don't need? So you will feel though that in those days when you and I when we want to download white papers from Microsoft or from Oracle, they'll give us a form. The form will ask you plenty of things. Now they're not even asking you anything any longer. Now they allow you to download the white paper for free. If they're going to ask, they're going to put consent at the bottom. They're going to ask you just one or two things, because now if they ever collect that information, then it puts them in trouble, because now they have to now demonstrate that they are adequately safeguarding, is the word I like to use when I'm talking about privacy, the information that they've even collected. The organization needs to go back to think about this. As I said, there's so much lack of adequate knowledge and skills with regards to privacy. A lot of people know information security, but they don't know privacy. And privacy is a different ballgame entirely. The lines of intersection, like I said at the very beginning, but it's a different ballgame. And this is more than just filing. All right. So we're talking about everything: KYC forms, customer complaint forms, conference forms. If you keep the information, then and you go to if you collect the information, you must collect it with consent, and you must treat it from a certain perspective. So these are the key things. There's also a lot of things around mapping. I mean, that's why you see every time, in Nigeria, they need to tell people that you want to do privacy. They say, oh, it should take you a week. Like another company came and said they can get it done in a week. And that's what people want. They want that quick. Or they just want you to quickly do some things, do some filings, because they need to collect something so they need to go to a regulator to give them a document. So they want to do it quick and dirty. That's what they want to do. They're not really thinking about doing it and doing it properly, because if you're going to do it and do it properly, you're going to have to do a lot of mapping. You're going to have to visit the forms examples that you use in even collecting privacy data. All right. Okay. So, this is not a training class. The training class is much more extensive with a lot of examples, with a lot of illustrations. But I took this in itself from our training material. So you can see personal data. You can see if you decide to keep it as anonymous data, when you decide to as anonymous data, and the difference between both of them, how you do this. What do you turn this into? Which one is reversible? Which one is irreversible? In which instance? I mean, if Michael Honora is still on the call, that's an expert when it comes to databases. So the people on this call that they come from a core technical background. They are the ones this needs to be done in SQL Server, in Oracle, in MySQL. So and this is part of privacy. But a lot of people have been filing for years and they don't even know that this area does exist. You have to decide what type of data you have and how exactly do you want to safeguard the data using privacy per time. Okay, masking is also in there. I know we do masking in information security, we do it in PCI DSS, but we also do masking in privacy in itself. Remember, I said you have to safeguard the data that is in your custody. So you cannot do privacy without adequately understanding the types of databases that you even have in the organization. Right, all right. So once again, I can go through all this, but that's not the idea. I'll just point out a couple of other things. As I said, legal people have a place in here. Oh, legal, definitely, they have a huge place here. Consent forms, agreements with vendors, the parts that you put in your customer account opening forms. I mean, legal people have to be adequately trained on privacy. Legal, massive training on privacy. Massive training on privacy. Okay, massive training on privacy. This is a big deal. So procurement is involved, supply chain is involved, legal is involved, compliance is involved, but that's just all. So it's not technical, not all non-technical. It's a decent combination of technical requirements and non-technical requirements. So if your organization is doing this whole thing and you're not thinking about the IT side, then you're not doing the right thing. And if you decide to do it completely as an IT project, then you're also not doing the right thing. It's a combination of both on both sides. Okay? Contracts, all sorts of contracts, right? Safeguarding, I like that word. So I don't like to use the word protecting when I'm talking about privacy. I like to use the word safeguarding, right? Safeguarding that which you're lawfully and legitimately required to collect. So there are legal factors, there are contractual factors, as it is, and of course there are all sorts of business factors that you also have to take into consideration. Can you open a bank account for somebody if the person does not sign consent? Those kinds of things. Okay, if the person does not assign consent, can they still enjoy a particular service? Can they still buy a certain product? Where is consent important? Where is consent not important? This is a big deal, right? And of course, do you have privacy? Everybody, at the very least, you should have a policy for privacy. Like, at the very least, worst case scenario. At the very least, worst case, your organization should have that. And then your organization needs to make proper moves to ensure that they implement that particular policy. It's not just to have policy. The policy says you should do this, data breach, that you put those things in place. The requirements of the policy, you put it in place. The people that register that are here, I'll send you this template. I'll send the templates to all of you. that registered for this. Only please remember that the data protection and privacy policy that everybody should go back to implement for their own organization. I'll send this to you. And of course, everybody also have a data protection officer. Everybody should have somebody who's trained, somebody who's qualified, somebody who understands data protection. And I dare say a group of people, but everybody should have a designated DPO. Every organization, at the very minimum, those two things, a policy that should be implemented and a trained, qualified, and willing person to be the DPO. Minimum 2 requirements for every organization. So sometimes when I'm speaking with the people, they say, oh, we've already done, we do our filing in Ghana, we've done NDPA in Nigeria. I'm like, but have you really implemented the standard? I'm not asking you about filing because I'm certain amongst like 100 companies, I can tell you that it's less than 5% that have actually implemented, like real implementation. But the client does not know the difference. The consultant does not know too. The auditor too does not know. So everybody does not know. I mean, so in the new version of 27001, privacy is now included in that standard. So it's a big deal. As I said, GDPR is the big one. All right, but we're not in Europe, so but we can meet GDPR if we implement 29100, and we can provide you an attestation to that, and you can meet DPR. You can meet it. GDPR if you also implement 27701, and if we actually meet your NDPA or your national act appropriately, you will also meet DPR or GDPR. The challenge is that you haven't done appropriate implementation. And this will probably be one of my last slides. I'll take about 2 more slides and I'll be done. These are some of the things. So I've seen where this is like, some of the things that, some implementation documents and things like that is applicable to GDPR, is applicable to what they do in Malawi, is applicable to the act in Ghana, is applicable to the act in Nigeria, is applicable to the act in Kenya. These are all things. A lot of our organizations, they have, what do they call it? A lot of our organizations have CCTV. They don't understand that, there's privacy tied to the CCTV data that is in your custody. People don't realize that. Right? All right. So if you look at it, look at the middle row, everybody. The policy, a website, CCTV. Remember, a policy is meant to be implemented. Nothing is as confusing as policies and procedures. Clients will say, I have a policy for it during an audit. Then I say that, show me the evidence. They say, the evidence is the policy. I'm like, no, the policy is just the intent. A lot of people are always confused. So if you look at the last row here, you can see towards the end, mobile device. That's a policy. The policy now needs the evidence that the policy has been implemented. Then the client starts to stare at me because the consultant did not tell them that the policies need to be implemented. There must be evidence of implementation for every policy and for every procedure. That is the challenge. That is the challenge. So people can write great documents, but have they implemented? Is there evidence that this thing is operational? All right. So these are a sample set of things. This is not the word of God. You can do it without some of these things, but yeah, a lot of these things are important. There's something called the ROPA, the records of processing activities, and many other things like that. Okay. I mean, I'm not going to talk about all this. These are the 11 principles. You can also see the information security is there. I showed you this earlier. I'm going to stop here. This is well, two more things. This one and one more thing, I believe. In privacy, we call this in privacy, we call risk assessment, that thing that we do in information security under 6.1 and on 6.1 and under 8.2 in 27001. When we come to privacy, we don't call it risk assessment, we call it the data protection impact assessment, which in reality is actually risk assessment. It's in reality, it is risk assessment. But they don't, in privacy, we don't call it risk assessment. In privacy, we call it data protection impact assessment. That's what we call it. We don't call it risk assessment. We call it data protection impact assessment. And you need to do this, but it's tied to the data that you collect in the organization, in different departments under different categories. You need to do this. I was with a client recently. I was asking them for this. They had nothing to say. Can you imagine? Like they actually, the lady who was the DPO actually, she said they don't have, that they didn't do any data protection and they had already done their filing. I was like, wow. Like interesting. It was part of the 27001 audit. I said, interesting. Interesting. How are you doing this if you don't? They hadn't even done it at all, not for a unit, not for a department, like, and they were appropriately, they were done their complete filing. So you can see that there is a problem. People are not implementing, they're just filing. People are not implementing, they are just filing. Right. So you also need technology. So you can use Azure, you can use all sorts of things, and there are many tools and platforms. Microsoft has got a lot of technologies. Modern day, Microsoft is my favorite technology provider in the world. I wonder how come I ended up not working for that company directly. They're my favorite technology provider. They've got a tool called Priva. They've got another tool called Purview. Everybody go and check those things. They've got three tools all around privacy. Priva. Everybody type something out and go Microsoft Priva. And they have something else called Microsoft Purview. And they have something else called Microsoft Entra. Entra. So some of you might even have licenses for some of these things. It's possible that you will have licenses for some of these things. And if you're doing this properly, your company can generate a dashboard like this for privacy. But before you get here, you must be relatively very mature. So in Africa, we're treating this thing like a joke. We just come up with the act and people just go do their filing, but not implementing. They have not adopted, but they filed. Right? But privacy is pretty much, that's what it is. That's it, people. I'm happy. Please give me your comments in the chat room as we bring this to a close. Please, everyone. Please give me some comments. What is that thing that has crossed your mind, that has occurred to you? As I promised, I will share the template. I'll share a template with everybody. So I was asking the question, who should be the DPO? And then I was say CISO, but then he didn't give you didn't give your reason. Yes. Kev says yes. So Lala says head of compliance. Okay, I'm counting. Philip says the CISO. Yes. So yes, the question was which, okay, in some organizations it's neither of both. That's what Michael is saying here. And in some organizations, it is not the head of compliance, it's not the CISO. They have a specific role that's usually outside of Africa, right? Where that person's job is actually the DPO. That's all the person does. In Africa, we just add it to what people do. All right. I think, yeah, I mean, so I don't even know who to argue for. It could be the head of compliance. What about if the head of compliance is not very technology aware? You have some heads of compliance that are like former accountants or something. And when you start to talk about these kinds of things, it's over their heads, so to speak. All right. So, all right. So, and that's what Michael is saying in the chat room, everybody, that, privacy can crumble an entire bank. But here we're treating it like a joke. We're playing with it. We're not, you know. So you can see, Kem is here, Michael is here. He used to work with me. He used to work for me donkey years ago. Now he's in Canada and he's an Oracle master. So you can see, looking at masking, and that's all under privacy, right? So you put quite a bit in there, right? So there's a lot. There's a lot. There's a lot. Can I take more comments? So I think when it comes to CISO and compliance, it just depends, really. It just depends. It just depends. In some instances, uh, um, it's the CISO because the head of compliance is not clued up at all. And in some instances, the head of compliance has interest, is definitely interested in it, um, and can drive it. Data mapping. There's so many things that I would have talked about, but our time is up. So can I get comments once again from everybody? But privacy is a big issue. It has a technical side, it has a core technical side to it. Yeah, people just file and answer questionnaire. That's what people do. I did that for absolutely. All right. So yeah. Yeah. So any questions, any thoughts? Price for what? Ademala. Price, if it's for training, you have to go send an email to Training Heights. Send it. But yeah, you have to send the specific. We have to know the organization. There's a lot. Okay. So yeah, good. Well, privacy is a big issue. If you go online and you say, "Oh, companies in Europe that have violated privacy and that have been sanctioned," you will see a long list. Companies in Europe, how much each of them paid, reputational damage, financial damage. But around here, we're just playing with this whole thing. Also, I did Amala, you have to send an email, we'll respond to you. So just drop your email. Some of the guys on training nights will come back to you. All right. So a lot of people are just playing with this whole thing. Yeah. So GTB was sanctioned. Most people are not implementing it, they're playing with it. Yeah. Oh, yes. If it's head of compliance, I agree with you completely, Precious. Well, at least must have interest. They must have a level. I agree. Some level, like Precious. Thank you very much for that. I completely agree with you. They must have some level, right? Some level. So privacy is a big deal. People are playing with it. They're joking with it. They're not taking it seriously. They're not doing it appropriately. Okay. Any other questions? So of course, most people you registered for this, so they'll share, will even share with you a foundation exam for privacy. So we'll share that with you, and I'll share a copy of that policy that I said. But remember, policies need to be implemented. Policies, they need to be implemented, they need to be executed. Policies, they need to be implemented and they need to be executed. There must be evidence that what is written in the policy, you are actually doing them. There must be evidence that what is written, that you're actually doing them. So everybody, if you look at the link in here in the chat room, it's for a foundation course. Is what it is that I encourage one of my clients, at least, it's the beginning. It's the start. Everybody should, so you should take that. All right. You should take that. There's a link in there and all that. So once again, we'll also share when we put this on when we put it in on YouTube, we'll share the link with everybody. So thank you. Thank you very much, everyone. All right. So they put some details in here. They'll also share with you via email. So please follow us on LinkedIn, on Instagram, on YouTube, on all those other places, and you can make a call as it is. Any request that you have, just send us an email. You reach out to any of us. We'll be happy to take your calls as it is. Thank you very much, everybody. Thank you. I hope this session has been useful. Can I get a comment from everybody as we bring this to a beautiful close? I hope the session has been useful. I hope it has been value adding, and I'm hoping that at least it will push you in the right direction or in the appropriate direction so that you can go back to your organizations and start to ask yourselves, are we really doing privacy? Are we joking? Or are we really doing this? Are we just filling the forms for the data for the Data Protection Commission? Are we just filling forms and submitting, or we are really implementing privacy? Which is it that we're doing? Right? Because the first thing everybody says is that I've done my filing, but it's more than just the fact that you're filing. I always tell people that it doesn't matter how many years you've done it. If I go to sit in front of your executives, I'll be able to convince them that you might be filing, but you have not yet implemented. Filing versus implementation. You might be filing, but you have not yet implemented. You might have a policy, but you have not yet executed the requirements and the content of the policy in itself. That's very important. Once again, thank you, everybody. The put some things in here. We'll definitely reach out to you via email as it is. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for your time. Thank you. I appreciate you all. And we look forward to seeing you on future webinars. We definitely look forward to seeing you on future webinars. Thank you very much once again, everybody. Thank you. God bless you. Thank you.
And it's a wrap, everyone. Thank you all for joining the call. And do have a great day.